Welcome back to Think Design Work Smart. I'm Alex Bolboaca and I'm coming at you from the Mozaic Works studios. And what I have for you today is a reaction that's not scripted on the topic of the Crowdstrike incident that affected so many people around the world. And this comes in a moment, a few months after I've written and published, both in written form as a blog post and as a video, an appeal to developers in general to grow up and take responsibility. And in this context, I can't help but looking at Crowdstrike, the Crowdstrike incident, and beyond the technical details, beyond whatever happened there, which I'm sure you've seen, or if you're interested, you can read, you can watch a number of videos. It doesn't really matter how it happened, why we got there, from the point of view of a user who was affected, of a person who wanted to take a flight on that day, of a person who got no response from emergency services, or as a person who had problems due to hospital rescheduling of surgeries and other procedures. It doesn't matter. It doesn't actually matter what are the technical details. What matters from a public perspective, and remember that this time it was a lot of people who were affected and a lot of services. From the point of view of the general public who has no idea of programming and doesn't know whether this was a kernel issue, a deployment issue, a Microsoft problem, a CrowdStrike problem, reliability not being architected properly, maybe skipping some steps. It doesn't matter. These details only matter to us, the developers. But to the outside world, what matters is the following. They woke up one morning wanting to go on with their life, and suddenly flights are grounded, emergency services don't answer, hospitals need to reschedule things. And then the information comes that it's due to a programming problem, a technical problem. And sure, as programmers, we might be tempted to blame management, we might be tempted to blame budgets or a number of things. But to the typical person, it doesn't matter. What they have seen is that programmers can create a huge mess around the world. This is what they have seen. And so, just to stick to this point a little bit more, think about when your car breaks down, or if your TV breaks down, or anything that you're using. Let's say the car breaks down. Do you care whether it's the problem is mechanical or electrical or fluids, or you don't care? You care whether the car works or doesn't work. That's all the level where you care. And when it comes to infrastructure that's important for you as a person, like a car is, but also like, getting to a flight, flying on a holiday or for business reasons, that is also a very big problem. And then you look at car manufacturers and compare them with software development. And you see that there is a whole conversation whether CrowdStrike or Microsoft are responsible and are liable for these issues. The question in your mind as a general user is how? How is this a question? Because you as a user, you haven't done anything. Okay? So, and when it comes to cars, if a car breaks down due to manufacturing problems, due to design problems, they have to fix it on their expense, right? This is why they recall cars in order to improve them. So, of course, the next question in the mind of a general audience would be, how comes that in the case of this particular issue that affected millions of people around the world, and maybe affected you, and maybe affected your peers, your family, your holiday, your, God forbid, access to emergency services. How is the company not liable? How, well, not how is, but how are we still discussing that the company might not be liable? It's really incomprehensible. So this is why I think we will be pushed to growing up and take responsibility. The thing that I wrote back then and that I talked about was not, well, it's part my desire. I want to do a good job, and I'm sure many of us want to do a good job. But it's also true that many developers don't care. It's also true that we haven't come together as a technical group and said, okay, we need to use these practices and define the profession to be around certain practices. And if you don't use them, then you are responsible for whatever happens then, right? It's what all engineers have to do. It's what doctors have to do. Doctors have to learn certain procedures. If they decide to skip a certain step in the procedure because they hurry up, they are liable. Okay? So, I think, first of all, I think that this is not the last incident that will happen on this scale, of this magnitude, and with this public exposure. I think there will be more. And okay. And not only I think there will be more, I think there will be more in the next few years. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe things will just settle and people will forget and nothing bad will happen. We'll continue working as we are. But my feeling right now is that there will be more incidents. And my feeling is that due to also national security issues, the need to ensure that the infrastructure works in countries and around the world, due to this need and due to the fact that a lot of it is managed through software, there will come a time when, and this will not be, it might be in the next 10 years or so, I think, when there will be a choice, when governments will come and say, look, you have the Crowdstrike incident. You have a recurrent behavior of introducing time-based bugs, like on leap days, on leap years, time changes, time zone changes, and so on. You have a history of allowing security issues to creep into your software. So you haven't done anything, or not enough. You haven't done enough about this because we still have these high-profile incidents. So the only reasonable thing to do is to come and say you need to do these practices or you will be liable. And this can apply on two levels. On one level, it could be an organization. But on the second level, it could be the individual programmer or the team involved in the development of that piece of code that ended up in producing issues. So and they will be very difficult to answer against this. I think that right now what's holding governments from doing anything around this is, on one hand, it's a domain that's difficult to understand, but on the other hand, it's also the big tech is probably doing a lot of lobby to prevent things like that happening. But there's no telling what will happen if at some point this equilibrium breaks and the public asks for fixes. Let's fix these things. So what would be the other solution? Well, the other solution would be to define a profession. And by defining a profession, I mean, could be things like, okay, if you're doing this type of, having some norms, having some rules that we all agree to follow, having procedures, having certain practices, certain disciplines that we all agree to follow. And if we don't follow them, that's fine. I mean, nobody will guard you. If nothing happens, fine. But if something happened and you haven't followed the procedure, okay, that's a bit of a problem. And the second thing, I think sooner or later companies will become liable for problems produced to their users through bugs that they introduced in their products. Now, this may be on different levels. It's one thing to be a startup, have hundreds of users or thousands of users, but it's another thing to have critical infrastructure. It's another thing to have real-time systems that are important for certain parts of the audience and so on. So there will probably be a variance here. And when I was thinking of this, I kept remembering that I've seen, I think it was more than 10 years ago, Bruce Schneier, one of the most prominent experts in security, gave a keynote at, I think it was OWASP Krakow. And what he argued back then is that the way to fix security in software development is by introducing insurance in the mix. So imagine that every companies are liable for the bugs and security issues and so on. And then companies take an insurance to prevent, to protect themselves in case such a thing happens. But then what insurance does is they are very good at evaluating risks. And demanding certain procedures, certain things to happen in your organization. And this could lead to improved reliability, improved security, fewer bugs, because now you have a vested interest in getting there. You don't want to increase the price you pay for the premium of your insurance. So that's briefly what I was thinking about all these topics, and I'm not sure how much of it will come to happen, but it's definitely a trend that I'm watching. This trend that, you know, we tend to, software is everywhere, software failures will become more public, more visible, will affect more people. And then the question is, what happens after? And this is a possible scenario. What do you think about this? Let me know in the comments. Thank you kindly for the view, and until next time, remember to think, design, and work smart.